sharing screen, share screen করলাম। স্টপ হচ্ছে না। হুম। স্টার্ট করছে, হ্যাঁ। Now, this question, why are Galileo students and year ones disappointed in him when he recounts under pressure from the Inquisition? Are they justified in losing faith in Galileo? So the answer starts. On one level, Brecht depicts Galileo as someone who, when faced with the instruments of torture death, would sacrifice their principles and favor survival. Conflict tests Galileo's resilience. He admits that he succumbs to physical pressure and gives in to the church when he sees the instruments of torture. It is hard to be resilient when one sees the instruments of torture. So many people refuse to adapt to change because they may lose power and status of church authorities. Many people, church authorities particularly, cling to outdated or traditional views because they fear the erosion of power. However, Brecht also suggests that we often act in contradictory ways or may not always be aware of the unintended consequences of our actions. Sometimes we sacrifice our principles, but this might turn out to do for the best. Galileo completes his life's work, the ideological clash between views and values. Conflict often occurs when progressive views held by individuals threaten the status quo. In this case, powerful social, political, religious institutions may react brutally as they seek to defend traditional and conservative views and values. What appears to be a simple clash between science and religion is more complicated. It becomes a clash between a church that is desperate to protect its power base and the scientist who wants to empower the peasants and encourage, however, them to take interests in and gain knowledge of a world and ideas that directly affect them. Consequences in such cases, powerful institutions work swiftly to silence individuals who threaten their power base. Often this clash leads to violent threats and personal or professional smear campaigns. This involves a high degree of pain, grief, and suffering on behalf of notable individuals such as Galileo. In many ways, Cardinal Bellarmine and Cardinal Barberini seek to depict Galileo as arrogant because he questions the intentions of the higher being, capital Being, higher Higher being, that is God. So he says, we have shifted the responsibility for such occurrences as we cannot understand life is made up of them to a higher being, that is God, and argued that all of them contribute to the fulfillment of certain intentions, that the whole thing is taking place according to great plan. But now you come along and accuse this higher being of not being quite clear how the stars move, whereas you yourself are. What are the consequences? The question might arise. Prophetically, the Inquisitor states, what does he say? And greatness is occasionally a difficult burden for those on whom God has bestowed it. If you think it yourself to be so, it is something else. It happens also in our country. Some sadhus and some saints and some arrogant believers of religion they start thinking that God has bestowed it. Now the church in England pursues a narrow-minded and arrogant course to protect its narrow base, ensured its dominance of the people by keeping them ignorant. Galileo, the search for scientific truth, has personal and professional consequences. Virginia becomes a bypasser casualty, victim of Galileo's conflict, and must sacrifice her proposed marriage to Ludovico because of the position adopted by Galileo. The Inquisitor seems to influence Virginia, hoping that she will pressurize the father. Virginia is preparing for an imminent marriage. The Inquisitor knows that if the earth is more vast than one originally believes, then a cardinal might get lost in such vast distances, and the Almighty might lose sight of the Pope himself. So it is important to remain close to your great Father, whom we all esteem so highly, my dear child. This is what has been said. Galileo's theory contradicted the Catholic Church's belief. At the same time that the earth was at the center of the God's universe, which reinforced the central position of the Pope in the world. Galileo's views reflect those of Copernicus that the earth is just one planet that revolves around the sun. According to the church, this theory was blasphemous, that is, goes against God, an inquisitor and the church. Inquisitor is the church, since that he recant his views. So the church believes that Galileo's theory threatens their authority. Mr. Galileo that is Bellarmine, tells him, tonight the Holy Office decided that the doctrine of Copernicus, according to which the sun is motionless and at the center of the cosmos, while the earth moves and is not at the center of the cosmos, is foolish, absurd, heretical, and contrary to our faith. Heretical means going against the church belief, against God. I have been charged to warn you that you must abandon this view. Galileo is entitled to his scientific views as long as they are simply a hypothesis. They must not be presented as fact. So the cardinal wishes that Galileo would wear his mask for his own protection and so that he can appear as a lamb and a good orthodox thinker. The church theory is that the church is the center of the universe. The sun revolves around the earth. This means that human beings are the most important thing in God's creation. They are central to God's design. Galileo pursues his interest in science because he believes that eventually the authorities will be forced to recognize the truth. He wants people to understand, which is why I go on working and buying expensive books instead of paying the milkman. But his belief in man's reason is problematic. Isn't it that if you also ask me that such a foolish question. Why buy expensive books instead of paying the milkman? That means the ordinary expenses. Galileo hopes that if he continues his work quietly, he will be unnoticed by the authorities. He underestimates the extent of such threat to the authorities. He says, I have written a book about the mechanics of the universe, that is all. What people make of it or don't make of it isn't my business, he says. Now the Inquisitor comes in. The Inquisitor represents the views of the church authorities. No one can contradict him. They believe that if the peasants start talking about the phases of Venus, they may even start to question the work of God. They may not see God as responsible for all miracles. They are annoyed that Galileo writes his theories of astronomy in the, what they say, idiom of fishwives and merchants. If the workers talk about God's authority, about these theories, they start to question God's authority. Ludovico's theories in scene 9, that is opposition theory, is also important. Ludovico explains the perspectives of the landowners and the farmers. They do not want the peasants talking about the change to the universe. They believe that it will disrupt their livelihoods and the status quo, that the normal divisions. So they say they could be upset if they heard that frivolous attacks on the church's sacred doctrines were in future to go unpunished. Even the ballad singer states was the independent spirit spreads like foul disease. Who wouldn't like to say and do just as it pleases? So there's a clash of ideology here. Conflict involves a clash of interests. Conflict often occurs when progressive views held by individuals threaten the status quo. In this case, powerful social and religious inquisitions. They work a lot. This happens in every religion. You're not you're not talking of Galileo. Okay, let us talk of Galileo. In this case, powerful social and political and religious institutions may react brutally as they seek to defend traditional and conservative views and values. They often seek to silence individuals who threaten their power base. Often, this clash leads to violent threats. This involves a high degree of pain, grief, and suffering on behalf of Galileo. Now comes the question of individuals' response to conflict. These are very difficult choices. Someone who doesn't know the truth is just thick headed, but someone who does know it and calls it a lie is a crook. Andrea quotes Galileo's views. So he says, someone who doesn't know the truth is just thick headed, but someone who does know it and calls it a lie is a crook. Andrea comments imply that Galileo is a fraud because he does not stick to the truth. Faced with the threat of death, Galileo recants, confesses. Galileo admits that I recanted because I was afraid of physical pain. Everyone is afraid of physical pain. They showed me the instrument that I'd be tortured. He is depicted as a person who fears for the loss of his life. He is someone who values the sensuality and physical nature of life. We all value. It depicts Galileo as someone who loves the simple pleasures of life and does not want to give them up. His food and wine are a constant source of pleasure to him. The Inquisitor rightly concludes that Galileo is a man of flesh and would give it in immediately. The Pope also described Galileo as a sensual person. He enjoys himself more than any man I have ever met. His thinking springs from sensuality. So the Pope also described Galileo as a sensual person. Now you see that when the church believes in such a manner, it becomes very important for us to know how to overcome this situation. But it happens. It happens then when we are made to believe what the church or what our religious institution think about. So that is how you say the situation gets much more complicated. That is why Galileo becomes the center of argument for all. Now, hey, exit for end of class for the now, with this question, which is very important for the examination purpose, be careful. Whatever I'm saying is very, very important for you because you have very less time and my answers are also very short for you so that you can cover it up. Next question. Why would the church initially allow Galileo to continue with his research and prohibit him from publishing it? The truth about Galileo and his conflict with the Catholic Church is very, very important for us to understand. Because Galileo has said that whatever he thinks is right and scientifically right, he will go with it. He will not step out of it. He thinks that he has not done anything wrong for which he should be taken to task because his intentions are very clear. He knows that nothing has gone wrong with him. It may be that the people around might not love him talking in this manner, but he would not stop talking. So you say that why would the church initially allow Galileo to continue with his research but prohibit him from publishing it? There is also not a long question. The truth about Galileo and his conflict with the Catholic Church. But for 4 centuries ago, the idea of a heliocentric solar system was so controversial that the Catholic Church classified it as a heresy going against God and warned the Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei to abandon it. Many people believe that Galileo was hounded by the church for almost 2 decades and that he openly maintained his belief in heliocentrism and that he was only spared torture and death because his powerful friends intervened on his behalf. But an examination of the fine details of Galileo's conflict with the church leaders doesn't bear that out. According to English Department Distinguished Research Professor Henry Kelly, in an article published this month, in the journal Church History, it is mentioned that there is something wrong in the belief of the church The authorities of the church. Church history, the name of the article. Kelly clarifies that some popularly held notions about Galileo travels with the church. We can only guess at what he really believed, said Kelly, who for his research undertook a thorough examination of the judicial procedure used by the church in its investigation of Galileo. Galileo was clearly stretching the truth when he maintained at his trial in 1633, 400 years ago, that after 1616 he had never considered heliocentrism to be possible. Admitting otherwise would have increased the penance he was given, but would not have endangered his life, since he agreed to renounce the heresy, and in fact it would have spared him even the threat of torture. So, this year marks the 400th anniversary of the beginning of church investigation into Galileo. Now, investigations have been carried earlier also, but it was not established. Whatever we investigate, it has to be open. When first summoned by the Roman Inquisition in 1616, 1616, Galileo was not questioned but merely warned not to espouse heliocentrism, his theory. Also in 1616, the church banned Nicholas Copernicus's book on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, published in 1543, which contained the theory that the earth revolved around the sun. After a few minor edits, making sure that the sun theory was presented as purely hypothetical, it was again allowed again in 1620 with the blessings of the church. 16 years after his first encounter with the church, Galileo published his Dialogue on Two World Systems. What is the name of the publication? Dialogue of the Two World Systems, in 1632. And the Pope, Urban VIII, ordered another investigation against him. This time he was prosecuted following the usual method of the Roman Inquisition. First, on April 12, 1633, before any charges were laid against him, Galileo was forced to testify about himself under oath in the hopes of obtaining a confession. This had been long been a standard practice in the heresy going against the church, God belief, proceedings, even though it was a violation of the canonical law of inquisitorial due process. Kelly said, however, the intervention was not successful. Galileo failed to admit any wrongdoing. The Cardinal Inquisitor realized that the case against Galileo would be very weak without any admission of guilt. So plea bargain was arranged. He was told that if he admitted to having gone too far in his treatment of heliocentrism, he would be let off with a light punishment. Galileo agreed and confessed that he had given strong arguments to the heliocentric proponent in his dialogue than to the geocentric champion. But he insisted that he did not do so because he himself believed in heliocentrism, Kelly said. Rather, he claimed that he was simply showing off his debating skills. So you see how literature took over the responsibility from Galileo. After his formal trial, which took place on May 10 of that year, Galileo was convicted of strong suspicion of heresy going against God. If you go against heresy, means you'll be punished thoroughly. A lesser charge than actual heresy. In sum, the 1616 event was not the beginning of a 17-year-old long trial, as is often said, but a non-trial, Kelly said. Galileo's actual trial lasted for only a fraction of a single day, with no fanfare at all. Kelly also noted that by the practice of the time, Galileo's guilty plea, which denied actual belief in the heresy, triggered an automatic examination of his private belief under torture, a new procedure adopted by church around the turn of the century. So whatever you do, you have to keep a record of what you are doing. That is very important. And that important thing was done. Galileo was never tortured, however. The Pope, this was a routine kind of limitation for people of advanced age and ill health like Galileo, and it should not be attributed to the influence of the scientist supporters. Ultimately, Galileo's book was banned and he was sentenced to a light regimen of penance and imprisonment at the discretion of church inquisitors. After one day in prison, his punishment was commuted to villa arrest, today we call house arrest, for the rest of his life. He died in 1642. 1642, that is going to be 400 years now. In his later years, Galileo insisted on the truth of the geocentric solar system. Kelly said the story that after he formally renounced the motion of the earth at his sentencing, he muttered, and yet it moves, is a romantic invention of a latter generation. If he had ever come out and said he believed in heliocentrism after swearing it off, he would have been liable to receive an automatic death sentence. Kelly said, Church, however, made efforts to ensure their version of Galileo's scientific beliefs were prevalent. So you say Galileo was very much stressed to prove that he was right. The church should not admit it, that his theory of heliocentrism was not true, not perfect. They could not admit it, his heliocentrism. This heliocentrism, also known as the heliocentric model, is a superseded astronomical model in which the Earth and planets revolve around the Sun at the center of the universe. Historically, heliocentrism was opposed to geocentrism, which placed Earth at the center. Now, who discovered this heliocentrism? Nicholas Copernicus proposed the heliocentric model for his work published in 1543, according to NASA Earth Observatory. Who did Galileo think of heliocentrism? Galileo continued his study of astronomy and became more and more convinced that all planets revolved around the sun. In 1632, he published a book that stated, among other things, that the heliocentric theory of Copernicus was correct. So, in science, heliocentrism is a cosmological model in which the sun is assumed to lie at or near a central point. For example, of the solar system of the universal universe, while Earth and other bodies revolved around it. So, why was heliocentrism rejected? The heliocentric model was generally rejected by the ancient philosophers for three main reasons. If Earth is rotating around its axis and orbiting around the Sun, then the Earth must be in motion. However, we cannot feel this motion, nor does this motion give rise to any obvious observational consequences. So you see, the father of the astronomy is considered to be Galileo Galilei, pioneered the experimental scientific method and was the first to use a refracting telescope to make important astronomical discoveries. He is often referred to as the father of modern astronomy and the father of modern physics. Even Albert Einstein called Galileo the father of modern science. So you see, the father of heliocentrism was Nicholas Copernicus, who was an astronomer and who proposed a heliocentric system that the planets orbit around the sun, that Earth is a planet which besides orbiting the sun annually, also turns once daily on its own axis, and that a very slow changes in the direction of the sun account for the precession of equinoxes that we know of. And we all know that the father of modern physics was Isaac Newton, associated with Cambridge University as a physicist and mathematician, became famous after propounding three laws of motion that established a connection between objects and motion. Now, what is the proof of heliocentrism? In 1610, Galileo Galilei observed with his telescope that Venus showed phases despite remaining near the sun in Earth's sky. First image, it was proved. This proved that it orbits the sun and not Earth, as predicted by Copernicus's heliocentric model, and disproved Ptolemy Ptolemy geocentric model, which is the second image. In the end, Galileo did not persuade the church to stay out of the controversy, but instead saw heliocentrism formally declared false. It was consequently termed heretical, going against the church belief, by the qualifiers who sit together and decide, since it contradicted the literal meaning of scriptures, going against the Bible and scriptures. Though this most position was not binding on the church. Even in Hinduism, we have this belief. Vedic literature refers to the sun as the center of the sphere, along with the term Guru Tava Akarshan. Guru Tava Akarshan. Thus, the heliocentric idea could have existed in a rudimentary form in the days of the Rig Veda around 1000 BC and was refined further by astronomers of later age. Now the question arises, is heliocentrism false? In actuality, Copernicus' heliocentric theory has its problems. First, the planets do not move in exact circles around the sun. They move in oval paths called ellipses. You have learned it in the school. Another important point is this idea of a center. Contrary Contemporary cosmology dispels the notion that the universe has a center at all. So is heliocentrism a theory of law? The theory that the Earth revolves around the Sun is called the heliocentric theory. Helio meaning sun, and centric meaning in the center. So this theory was developed in parts by different astronomers over many years, namely Aristarchus, Copernicus, Aristarchus, Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler. You all know this name. So you see, this theory was a great controversial theory. And of course, this theory did create a lot of uproar. So in Hinduism also they believe there are seven universes. So the sun revolves around the earth. Nicholas Copernicus. Coming to the actual answer to your question, it was Nicholas Copernicus who first officially put forth the idea that earth revolved around the sun and not vice versa. Sun didn't revolve around the earth. We also know from our school days when we were taught in school, his theory was later supported by Galileo Galilei and Isaac Newton. Even Aryabhatta, India supported it. Aryabhatta was the first to propose the theory that Earth revolves around the sun. So the difference between heliocentrism and geocentrism is that the geocentric model says that the Earth is at the center of the cosmos, the universe, and the planets, the sun and the moon. The stars circle around it. The early heliocentric models consider the sun as the center and the planets revolve around the sun. Then the question aroused who discovered Earth is rotating? It was Nicholas Copernicus. Correct answer. Nicholas Copernicus found that the Earth rotates upon its axis and revolves around the sun. Nicholas Copernicus was a mathematician, astronomer, and Catholic clergyman from Poland. So, I input so many details and data about this heliocentrism. Most students and teachers even don't understand. But I have found it myself, read it, and then only told you about it. The church, however, made efforts to ensure the version of Galileo's scientific beliefs were prevalent. The most unusual aspect of the proceedings was that the sentence was ordered to be widely publicized in scientific circles. Kelly said the cardinals asserted that Galileo had always been orthodox in his belief concerning the cosmos and had never believed in or affirmed the heliocentric heresy. So you see, the cardinals were also responsible for not allowing us to know the real fact behind it. And Galileo had done his job. Very well done. Very nicely done. And for him today only, we have been able to understand the theory of heliocentrism much better than anyone else. If you wouldn't have come forward with this theory, then of course, maybe today also the controversy would have continued.